The rain that day wasn't heavy, but persistent, like a quiet confession. Ayaan stood beneath the sagging awning of the old campus cafe, watching rivulets race each other down the glass. His fingers gripped a weathered book of poetry, the one he always returned to when the world grew too loud. Inside, tucked between its fading pages, rested a folded note he hadn't dared to reread in weeks. Across the street, Rehan emerged from the law faculty building, his dark coat clinging to him like a secret. He didn't see Ayaan right away. His eyes scanned the puddles, lost in thought. When their gazes met, it lasted only a second, but it was enough. A silent recognition passed between them, the kind that made the world still for just a heartbeat. They hadn't spoken much in public since the semester began. Too many eyes watched. Whispers moved faster than truth. And in this city, love between two men wasn't just unwelcome, it was ammunition. Still, in hidden corners and stolen hours, their story had unfolded like a forbidden verse. It started with glances in the library, grew into scribbled notes passed between borrowed books, and bloomed in the quiet spaces where only their shadows dared to touch. Rehan was everything Ayaan wasn't, outspoken, sharp, the center of every room. He came from a family where reputation was currency, where every gesture was weighed and judged. Ayaan, in contrast, wore his thoughts like second skin, soft, honest, impossible to armor. He didn't seek Rehan out. Somehow, Rehan found him anyway. Their connection was never loud, but it was unshakable. They would sit beneath the tree near the old amphitheater after dusk, speaking in low tones about futures they might never live. Rehan would quote philosophers with a half-smile, and Ayaan would counter with poetry, making Rehan laugh the way he didn't laugh with anyone else. But recently, something unspoken had crept into those moments. A flicker behind Rehan's eyes, a hesitation in his voice. Once, Ayaan reached for his hand beneath the library table and felt Rehan flinch. Not pull away, but freeze. That chill lingered longer than the touch. Ayaan didn't ask, not yet. Fear made him cautious. Hope made him patient. He believed in the love they'd grown, even in its silence. That night, as the cafe emptied and the rain finally softened, Ayaan slipped the book into his bag and stepped out into the street. Rehan was gone, but etched on the window's condensation
were 5 letters. Ayaan. Someone had traced them from the inside before the glass fogged over again. He smiled faintly, touched the window, and let his hand fall away.
The city moved on, unaware, but in the quiet spaces where their love had taken root, something still pulsed, fragile, trembling, and real. Rehan hadn't been himself for days. It began with missed calls, texts read but unanswered, and promises, postponed with the excuse of being buried in work. Ayaan tried not to take it personally. He told himself Rehan had midterms, family obligations, the weight of expectations. But deep down, he felt the shift, the way silence had crept between them, spreading like frost on a window pane. One evening, as dusk dipped the campus in amber, Rehan finally agreed to meet. They sat on the stone bench near the amphitheater, the one that once felt like theirs. But tonight, the air was different. Rehan's posture was too still, his eyes unreadable. "I think we need to slow things down," he said, not meeting Ayaan's gaze. The words landed with a dull thud. Ayaan blinked, confusion crossing his face like a cloud. "Slow things down," he repeated, his voice quiet. Rehan nodded. "There's too much noise lately. People are starting to notice. My cousin, Saif, he's been asking questions." Ayaan stiffened. He'd heard of Saif. Rehan spoke of him rarely, and always with an edge. A businessman, deeply political, obsessed with appearances. Rehan had once confessed Saif would ruin a life just to preserve a name. What did he say? Ayaan asked. Rehan hesitated. His fingers curled tightly around the edge of the bench. He knows, or thinks he knows. He threatened to go to the dean, said you manipulated me, that you've been flaunting it. Ayaan drew in a breath, stunned. That's a lie. I know it is, Rehan said quickly, but he's powerful. If he pushes this, you'll lose everything. He's already spoken to 2 of my classmates. They're willing to say you crossed a line. Ayaan's heart beat louder now, not with love, but with panic. So this is why you're pulling away? I'm trying to protect you, Rehan whispered. You don't understand what he's capable of. He said he'd make sure you never graduate, that your scholarship would vanish. You had to leave me in the dark? Ayaan's voice trembled. Lie to me while pretending everything's fine? Rehan looked away. I'm sorry. Ayaan rose to his feet, hands clenched. The betrayal wasn't in Rehan's fear, it was in his silence. The man who once said love meant choosing, not hiding, had chosen fear instead. I didn't ask you to protect me, Ayaan said softly. I asked you to stand with me. Rehan opened his mouth but said nothing. The wind moved through the trees, cold and fast, sweeping away the warmth they'd built between them. Ayaan turned and walked into the dusk, leaving Rehan behind on the bench, alone for the first time. He didn't look back, but in his chest, something began to unravel, slowly, silently, and with the weight of truth unspoken. The fallout came quietly, like dust settling after a storm. Ayaan returned to campus the next week and noticed it in small ways first. The way conversations hushed when he entered a room, how people he once called friends avoided his gaze. Seminars, no one sat beside him. In the dining hall, whispers bloomed like mold in corners he could no longer reach. At first, he thought it was paranoia. But then came the formal notice. A review board had been convened to investigate inappropriate conduct. The words were clinical, sharp-edged, and steeped in a false narrative. He read the document twice before the reality sank in. Saif hadn't made idle threats. He'd acted. Rehan didn't come to his defense. That was the part Ayaan couldn't forgive. The silence, the absence, the choice to vanish just when the truth needed a voice. Rehan had once held his hand through fear. Now he wasn't even a shadow. Each night, Ayaan stayed late in the library, not to study, but to disappear. He buried himself in forgotten books and silence, as if their weight might anchor him to something real. The poetry that once felt like refuge now tasted of irony. Love was a word he no longer trusted. On one of those nights, as the library lights dimmed and the silence deepened, he found himself at the back corner table. Their table. The wood still bore a faint ink stain from when Rehan's pen had burst during finals. That ridiculous moment, when they'd both laughed too loudly and drawn the attention of the librarian, played in his mind like a scene from a lost film. He sat down, tired. Weary not just from accusation, but from the erasure of something sacred. No one knew the truth of what they had, and no one seemed to care. Then, as he opened a volume of Neruda, something fell from its pages. A folded scrap of notebook paper, yellowed at the edges. His name was written on it in Rehan's handwriting. He unfolded it slowly. The message was brief. They silenced me, but not my heart. Every lie I let them spread was a betrayal to you. I chose fear. I chose wrong. Forgive me. Ayaan sat, still for a long time, the note trembling in his fingers. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Words, after all, could be forged like signatures. But something in the curve of each letter, the shakiness of the pen stroke, felt real. Felt raw. It didn't absolve Rehan, but it broke the numbness. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the tall library windows. whispering through the cracks. Ayaan pressed the note back into the book and closed it with care. He didn't smile. But he didn't feel as alone anymore either. Somewhere beneath the wreckage, the truth was still breathing. And it was waiting for someone brave enough to speak. The campus felt foreign now, as though it had turned its face away from Ayaan. But even in that estrangement, he walked with quiet resolve. He had nothing left to hide, nothing left to protect, but the truth itself. And so, during a student-led forum on academic integrity, ironically held in the very hall where Rehan once debated policy with passion, Ayaan stood before the mic. His voice didn't tremble. He didn't name names or point fingers. He simply told his story. Not the scandal others whispered about, but the truth. A story of two people who found love where they were told it didn't belong, who believed they could protect it by hiding it, and who lost each other trying to survive the cost. He didn't ask for sympathy. He asked for understanding. "There's a difference," he said, "between a mistake and a lie, and there's a difference between shame and silence. I chose love. I don't regret that." Afterward, he left the hall before the applause could find him. He didn't want validation. He wanted peace. That evening, just as the sun slipped behind the chapel spire, Rehan found him by the amphitheater. His face was drawn, older than it had looked just weeks ago. There was no pretense now, only ache. "I heard what you said," he began, stepping slowly into the shadow of their past. Ayaan didn't look up. "Then you know everything." "I know I failed you." A pause stretched between them. "I was scared," Rehan continued, "of Saif, of my family, of losing everything I'd been groomed to become. But what I didn't understand is, I lost more by giving you up. I lost myself." Ayaan looked at him then, truly looked. The man in front of him wasn't the same. The Polish was gone, replaced with something raw and honest. "I don't need a confession," Ayaan said. "Not anymore. I needed you to speak when it mattered, and you didn't." Rehan's shoulders slumped. "I know. But I'm speaking now." Ayaan studied him in the fading light. "And what are you saying?" "That I still love you. That I want to make it right, not with words, but with actions. Even if it's too late for us, I won't let them erase the truth." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every moment they'd lost, every word unsaid. Ayaan didn't reach for his hand. He didn't forgive him, not yet, but he nodded, just once. That was enough. As Rehan sat beside him on the bench, not touching, just close, the wind shifted. A softness returned to the air, like the world had exhaled. And in that moment, though the past could not be undone, something fragile took root again. Not the old love, but something braver. The truth hadn't died. It had only been waiting for the courage to live.